gruesome picture of the real pain of war. Every inch of this hospital has been turned into an operating room. Doctors perform complicated emergency procedures on the floor, whilst others use the basic facilities available to them.
We have just received 7 injuries. 3 of them are in serious condition due to direct head injury. 2 were rushed to the operations room, and others were taken to CT scan. I have noticed that among the injured is a person who was crippled due to a previous Israeli strike years ago. Now he suffers a shrapnel in the head.
Mustafa Othman is the man that the doctor is talking about.
We gathered to pray in the mosque. As soon as we started to pray, we were surprised by shells. The mosque was full of worshippers. The shells hit the last lines of them. All worshippers ran away except me and the injured.
Gaza's hospitals have been under immense strain since Israel blockaded the Strip when Hamas took over in 2007. Vital medical supplies have not been available for months, and this latest offensive has just shown how woefully underprepared Gaza's hospitals are. Imran Khan, al-Jazeera.
Live to Ayman Mohideen in Gaza City. Ayman, I don't know how much of these pictures you've actually seen there. They really tell an extraordinary story, and as Imran Khan made the point there, the pressure on the hospitals at the moment is so great. Surely they can't cope like this for much longer.
Well, that is what health officials in Gaza, international observers, have been saying for the past 8 days. In fact, they have been warning about it for 18 months. Obviously, this situation for the health officials began to deteriorate when Israel imposed an 18-month siege that began to slowly deplete, deteriorate their facilities and their resources. And it culminates on days like this. On days like this, when they are overwhelmed by casualties, as they have been for the past 8 days, they struggle to cope with the patients. They, as we've seen and as we've reported over the past 8 days, they convert every room that they have an inch of space in, essentially into an operating room, into an emergency room to treat patients. We've seen them use everything at their disposal to try to save lives, and this is the immense pressure that they are working under, and this is why a lot of the organizations that operate here, the International Committee of the Red Cross, the United Nations, the World Health Organization, others, continue to warn that the complete health sector in Gaza is in a state of collapse because of the pressure that they are under, because of the depleted resources that they have to work with, Kamal.
Ayman, I don't know if you can answer this directly, but I'm still going to ask you, why a mosque? I mean, I know we've seen it before, but why target a mosque, do you think, when the official line is always going after Hamas targets and Hamas personnel?
Well, what Israel contends is that it's a mosque. The mosque itself is being either used as a gathering place for some of these officials that belong to Hamas or some of the leaders of the military factions. They say they hold meetings there. They say they have intelligence there, that sometimes they house rockets or they store rockets. Sorry, Kamal, we were just hearing the sound of a rocket actually being fired. But Israel contends that these types of mosques are used for precisely those reasons, and that legitimizes them as targets. In reality, though, whatever the mosque may end up being used for, at the end of the day, it's still a place of worship. And if they, the worshippers who go to these mosques, don't know what else the mosque is being used for, they're walking essentially into a death trap, as we've seen today. This violates almost every norm of international law, but there is no sense that Israel is abiding by that when it comes to this, the holy sites for people here in Gaza. We've seen at least a handful of mosques destroyed throughout the course of this operation, but we've seen actually very little evidence that is provided by the Israelis to suggest this is in fact what we have to show that this mosque is being used by Hamas and elsewhere. In fact, one of the mosques that was targeted Thursday in Jabalia, Khulafa al-Rashidin, I went to that mosque. It was where they had the funeral procession for Nizar al-Rayyan, and when I went to the mosque, I checked it out, I looked around. I'm certainly no expert, but I didn't see any shells, I didn't see any kind of ammunition stored, and we had a good chance to walk all the way around, and the people who live nearby took us down to the basements of the mosques and showed us. We saw the shells that landed there and the kind of destruction they've caused, but we certainly didn't see any other type of shells. So the evidence to suggest these mosques are being used for some type of, as Israel calls it, terror activity, doesn't resonate very well with the evidence on the ground, Kamal.
Ayman, let's change tack a bit if we can. Nighttime, obviously, in Gaza. Talk me through what a night in Gaza is like for residents there if this shelling is to continue. Where do they go? Is there anywhere they can go other than their own houses?
Kamal, the short answer to that is fear. That's it. The only way to describe what Palestinians experience night after night is simply fear and terror. It only gets worse at night, not because of the intensification of attacks, but because of the uncertainty. As you can see behind me, it's absolutely pitch black. In fact, it's probably our lights that are lighting up most of what you can see, if anything at all. The reality of it is, in situations like this where it's completely black, communications are already crippled because of the poor infrastructure. It's very difficult to get around. It's very difficult, and people are full of fear to actually leave their homes and go elsewhere. Throughout the course of the day, all we do hear from Palestinians when they do venture out is at nighttime, they get as many people as they can from their families. They just try to stay inside. They try to stay home. Whatever communication, whatever media outlet they have, radio or anything that they can actually try to listen to, they try to do that just to find out what's the latest. But the sad reality is most of them don't have electricity, and it won't be until the early morning when they wake up and hear for themselves what has happened overnight that they know what it is. The only thing they have is the complete blackness and the constant sound of Israeli warplanes flying overhead, the Israeli Navy firing in their direction, and now the Israeli tanks on the northern part of Gaza also firing into Gaza. So there's no other way to describe it than just absolute sheer fear. That is what every Palestinian we've spoken to has described time and time again. And now